My son stole my late husband's $100,000 watch collection until I revealed the hidden camera that exposed his greed and sent him to prison. My name is Theodora Mae Jenkins, and at 78 years old, I never thought my own son would steal the precious watch collection that represented 50 years of my late husband's passion and love. But when Raymond Jr. decided that he deserved his father's watches more than I did, he made biggest mistake of his criminal life because this old woman had been preparing for his theft long before he ever thought to commit it. My husband Raymond Sr. had been collecting vintage watches since he was 25 years old, starting with a modest Timex he bought with his first paycheck and gradually building one of the most valuable private collections in our state. Raymond worked as a master watchmaker for 43 years, repairing timepieces for wealthy customers while secretly acquiring rare watches whenever he could afford them. Over 5 decades, Raymond had assembled a collection of 37 vintage watches, including several Rolex Submariner models from the 1950s, Patek Philippe complications worth more than most people's cars, and a rare Omega Speedmaster that had been worn by an Apollo astronaut. But the crown jewel of Raymond's collection was a 1927 Patek Philippe minute repeater that he had purchased at auction in 1995 for $18,000. By the time Raymond passed away in 2021, that single watch was valued at over $40,000, and the entire collection was worth approximately $110,000, according to a professional appraisal. Raymond had always planned to leave his collection to me with the understanding that it would eventually go to our son Raymond Jr. after my death. But Raymond Jr. had different ideas about the timing of his inheritance. Raymond Jr. was 49 years old and had struggled financially his entire adult life. Despite having every advantage his father and I could provide, we had paid for his college education, helped him start multiple businesses that failed, and bailed him out of debt countless times over the years. Raymond Jr. had never shown any interest in his father's watch collecting hobby and had often made dismissive comments about spending so much money on timepieces. But after his father died, Raymond Jr. suddenly became very interested in the value of the watch collection. At the reading of the will, Raymond Jr. learned that he would inherit the watches only after my death, and he was clearly disappointed by this arrangement. Over the following months, Raymond Jr. began visiting me more frequently than he had in years, always asking to see his father's watches and commenting on their increasing value. Raymond Jr. would hold each watch carefully, examining the craftsmanship and asking detailed questions about their worth. He also began suggesting that I should sell some of the watches to pay for household expenses or medical care. When I refused to sell any of the watches, Raymond Jr. became more insistent, claiming that keeping such valuable items was impractical for an elderly woman living alone. He argued that the watches were too valuable to keep in a house without a security system, and suggested that I should store them in a bank safety deposit box. But I knew Raymond Jr. was really suggesting that he should take possession of the watches for safekeeping, which would make it easier for him to sell them. I had learned to be suspicious of Raymond Jr.'s motives after decades of watching him make poor financial decisions and look for easy ways to get money. My suspicions grew when Raymond Jr. began bringing his girlfriend Crystal to visit, and she showed unusual interest in the watch collection. Crystal would ask to try on different watches and made comments about how beautiful they would look with her outfits. Crystal also suggested that some of the watches were too masculine for me to wear and might be better suited for someone who could appreciate their full value. The combination of Raymond Jr.'s financial desperation and Crystal's obvious greed convinced me that they were planning to steal the watches. I decided to take precautions to protect my late husband's collection without alerting Raymond Jr. to my suspicions. First, I had the watches professionally photographed and documented with serial numbers and detailed descriptions. Then I moved the watches from the bedroom dresser where Raymond had always kept them to a hidden safe that I had installed behind a false wall in my basement. I also installed hidden security cameras throughout my house, focusing particularly on areas where the watches had been stored. The cameras were motion activated and connected to a cloud storage system that would preserve recordings, even if someone tried to destroy the equipment. I told no one about these security measures, including my neighbor who checked on me regularly and my attorney who handled my estate planning. 6 months after Raymond's death, my precautions proved necessary when Raymond Jr. finally decided to steal the watches. On a Tuesday morning in March, Raymond Jr. called to tell me that he was coming to visit and wanted to spend some time looking through his father's belongings. I agreed to the visit but activated all the security cameras before he arrived. Raymond Jr. came to the house alone, claiming that Crystal was working, but I noticed that he parked his car around the corner instead of in my driveway. During the visit, Raymond Jr. seemed nervous and distracted, constantly checking his phone and looking toward the windows. He asked to see his father's watches, saying that he wanted to remember his father by holding the timepieces that had meant so much to him. I told Raymond Jr. that I had moved the watches to a safer location and would show them to him another time. Raymond Jr. became agitated and insisted that he needed to see the watches immediately, claiming that he was feeling emotional about his father's death and needed the comfort of handling his father's possessions. When I continued to refuse, Raymond Jr. became angry and accused me of not trusting my own son. He also suggested that I was being unreasonable about his request and that any normal mother would want to help her child process his grief. But I held firm, and Raymond Jr. eventually left the house, appearing frustrated and upset. 2 days later, Raymond Jr. returned to my house while I was at my weekly doctor's appointment. He used his key, which I had given him years earlier for emergencies, to enter the house while I was away. The security cameras recorded everything as Raymond Jr. searched through my bedroom dresser, looking for his father's watches. When he couldn't find them in their usual location, Raymond Jr. began searching other rooms, becoming increasingly frantic as he realized the watches were not where he expected them to be. Raymond Jr. searched through closets, cabinets, and storage boxes, looking for any sign of the watch collection. The cameras captured his growing desperation as he tore through my personal belongings, leaving a trail of destruction throughout the house. Unable to find the watches in their obvious hiding places, Raymond Jr. began looking in more unusual locations, including inside book covers, behind picture frames, and even in the refrigerator. After 2 hours of searching, Raymond Jr. finally discovered the hidden safe in the basement. The cameras showed him examining the safe and making phone calls, presumably to Crystal or to someone who could help him open it. Raymond Jr. left the house that day without taking anything, but the cameras had recorded clear evidence that he had entered my home without permission and had searched for valuable items with obvious intent to steal. I reviewed the camera footage that evening and saw exactly what Raymond Jr. had done. The recordings showed that he had not just casually looked for the watches, but had conducted a systematic search of my entire house. The cameras also captured Raymond Jr. taking photographs of other valuable items, including my jewelry and silver serving pieces. It was clear that Raymond Jr. was planning a more comprehensive theft than just stealing his father's watches. The next morning, I called my attorney and arranged to meet with him immediately to discuss what legal actions I could take. My attorney advised me that Raymond Jr.'s behavior constituted attempted burglary and criminal trespass, even though he had used the key I had given him. The attorney also pointed out that Raymond Jr.'s systematic search and photography of valuable items showed clear intent to commit theft. He decided that I should report the incident to police and provide them with the security camera footage as evidence. But before contacting law enforcement, I wanted to give Raymond Jr. one more chance to confess and return my key. I called Raymond Jr. and asked him to come to my house for an important conversation about family matters. When he arrived, I showed him selected footage from the security cameras that clearly showed him searching through my belongings. Raymond Jr. initially tried to deny that the person in the videos was him, claiming that the footage must show someone else who had broken into my house. When that excuse became obviously ridiculous, Raymond Jr. claimed that he had been looking for family documents that he needed for legal purposes. He said he had searched through my belongings because he was trying to find important papers related to his father's estate. But the camera footage clearly showed Raymond Jr. examining jewelry and taking photographs of valuable items that had nothing to do with legal documents. When I confronted Raymond Jr. with evidence of his lies, he finally admitted that he had been planning to take some of his father's watches. Raymond Jr. claimed that he only wanted to borrow the watches temporarily to have them appraised, and that he had intended to return them after determining their current market value. He also said that he thought I would approve of his actions if he explained them properly, and that he had only searched my house to save me the trouble of finding the watches myself. But I knew Raymond Jr. was lying because the camera footage showed him photographing other valuable items and clearly planning a more extensive theft. I told Raymond Jr. that his behavior was criminal and that I was disappointed in him for trying to steal from his own mother. I also demanded that he return my house key immediately and that he stay away from my property unless specifically invited. Raymond Jr. became defensive and angry, claiming that I was overreacting to what he described as a misunderstanding. He said that as my son, he had a right to know where his father's watches were kept and that he had only been trying to protect them from potential theft. Raymond Jr. also accused me of being paranoid and suggested that installing security cameras showed that I no longer trusted my own family. But his excuses rang hollow when confronted with clear video evidence of his criminal behavior. I gave Raymond Jr. 24 hours to return my key and write a formal apology acknowledging his wrongdoing. When he failed to do either, I contacted the police and filed charges for criminal trespass, attempted burglary, and attempted theft. The detective assigned to my case was immediately interested in the security camera footage, which provided clear evidence of Raymond Jr.'s crimes. The detective also discovered that Raymond Jr. had been researching watch dealers and auction houses, suggesting that he had already planned how to sell the stolen timepieces. When police arrested Raymond Jr., they found detailed notes about the value of specific watches in his father's collection and contact information for several buyers who dealt in stolen goods. The investigation also revealed that Crystal had been pressuring Raymond Jr. to steal the watches so they could use the money to pay off gambling debts. She had accumulated Crystal had been betting on online casinos and had borrowed money from dangerous people who were threatening her with violence if she didn't repay her debts. Raymond Jr. had initially resisted Crystal's demands, but had eventually agreed to steal the watches when her creditors began threatening to harm both of them. During the trial, I testified about discovering the theft attempt and about the security measures I had taken to protect my late husband's collection. The prosecutor used the camera footage to show that Raymond Jr.'s crimes were premeditated and systematic rather than impulsive mistakes. Several expert witnesses testified about the value of the watch collection and explained how difficult it would have been for me to replace the stolen items. The defense attorney tried to argue that Raymond Jr. had not actually stolen anything and should only face minor charges for trespassing. But the prosecutor successfully argued that attempting to steal valuable items was just as serious as completing the theft, and that Raymond Jr.'s systematic search showed clear criminal intent. Raymond Jr. was convicted of attempted burglary, criminal trespass, and conspiracy to commit theft. He was sentenced to 3 years in state prison in order to pay restitution for the emotional distress and security system costs his actions had caused. Crystal was also arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit theft and with gambling violations related to her debts. She received 2 years probation and was ordered to attend gambling addiction counseling. After the trial, I had my locks changed and removed Raymond Jr.'s name from my emergency contact list. I also updated my will to exclude Raymond Jr. from inheriting any part of his father's watch collection. Instead, I arranged to donate the entire collection to a horological museum, where it would be preserved and displayed for educational purposes. The museum was thrilled to receive such a significant donation and created a permanent exhibit featuring Raymond's watches. The exhibit included detailed information about each timepiece and told the story of how Raymond had built the collection over 50 years. I felt that donating the collection honored Raymond's memory better than leaving it to a son who had tried to steal it. The security system that had caught Raymond Jr.'s theft attempt continued to protect my home and gave me peace of mind about living alone. I also used my experience to educate other elderly people about protecting valuable collections from family members who might be tempted to steal. My story became an example of how proper security measures could prevent theft and provide evidence needed to prosecute criminals. Several other elderly collectors contacted me to ask for advice about protecting their valuable possessions from their own relatives. I proved that being elderly does not mean being helpless against theft, even when the thieves are your own children. Theodora Mae Jenkins showed that sometimes protecting a deceased spouse's legacy requires prosecuting living family members who would dishonor that legacy. The watch collection that Raymond Jr. tried to steal became a permanent tribute to his father's craftsmanship and passion. The hidden cameras that caught Raymond Jr.'s crime also protected the memory of a man who had spent 50 years building something beautiful. My story became a reminder that valuable collections require protection not just from strangers, but from family members who might view them as easy targets. The watches that represented 50 years of love and dedication were saved from being sold to pay gambling debts. Raymond Jr. spent 3 years in prison thinking about how his greed had cost him not only his freedom, but also his inheritance and his relationship with his mother. When he was released from prison, Raymond Jr. moved to another state and never contacted me again. The watch collection that he had tried to steal continued to educate and inspire visitors at the Horological Museum. Theodora Mae Jenkins proved that protecting what matters most sometimes requires being willing to prosecute the people closest to you. The security cameras that had been installed to protect watches ended up protecting something more important, the integrity of a 50-year legacy of craftsmanship and love.